We are getting a really good view of my cluttered office and all the stuff I have piled around for all the different things I'm doing from genealogical work. That's what all those binders are, to my hat that I wear gardening and out hiking, and my hiking poles back there in the corner, and pillows and earphones and backpacks and everything else. But gives you a taste of who your pastor is. You know, among all the things happening in the world today, especially the COVID pandemic, it has me wondering this day and a lot here recently what I would do if I just had 1 year to live. You know, I'm not the only person that's been having those thoughts. The singer songwriter Jimmy Buffett released a new album very recently. It's called Living on the Flip Side. A few weeks back, and I actually received, here it is, hang on. I'm such a huge fan of Jimmy Buffett, I actually received 4 copies of it in the mail for free. Living on the Flip Side. One of his songs on this is called Live Like It's Your Last Day. Now, I wanted to share some of the lyrics with you from this song because I thought they're very poignant. It says, cats have 9 lives and eons to play. Planets and stars are light years away. Their cosmic clock ticks and it talks here in the Milky Way. Live like it's your last day. Just like a whirlpool, the universe has rules. There's no rehearsal or cosmic reversal. You can pray or stand still or grab one last thrill. But here's all I have to say. Live, relive, learn to forgive. Time just keeps slipping away. Live, relive, learn to forgive. Live like it's your last day. I assure you that JB and myself are not the only ones who have these thoughts. Let me readjust here a little bit. Have you ever strolled through a cemetery? We have several famous ones here in the United States. How about Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C.? I've been there. It's great watching the changing of the guard and watching their diligence as they go there. I've also visited Gettysburg, and no doubt if you've been there, you've walked among those who are laid to rest on those hollow grounds. Or perhaps you've been down to New Orleans and visited one of the above ground cemeteries. I've been there also, very interesting place. You know, here's a sidebar to this. Out of curiosity, what do you think are the top 3 visited burial places of individuals in the USA? Here we go. The number 1 visited place is Elvis Presley's burial. Number 2 is down in New Orleans, Marie Laveau. And number 3 is John F. Kennedy. Personally, I visited those 3 cemeteries, plus several other cemeteries. One of the reasons is some years back, my sister began to study the genealogy of our family. And as a part of that investigation, it takes you to cemeteries to hunt family members. And I started to do that as well. As I mentioned, I have all these books. I have 6 books back behind me that I put together as I'm trying to put those together into a real book. So I visited a lot of cemeteries because of that. I've also visited several cemeteries because I'm a Civil War buff, and visiting them helps me understand the history better. And of course, Ireland. You knew that was going to slip in here somehow. I love the history of old cemeteries. Plus, I am exceptionally fond of the high crosses that adorn the sacred places in Ireland. But regardless which cemetery I visit, one of the things I notice when I visit any cemetery is the tombstones that adorn the grounds. You know, some of them are pretty simple, and others are extremely elaborate. And then you find the ones where the weather has worn and have left them either barely visible or completely worn out. You know, up in Lafayette at Greenbush Cemetery, my great and my great grandfathers are buried. The most recent one still shows the name of Samuel J. Barrick, a Civil War veteran. But the older stone, which should read Samuel Barrick, is barren. The weather has worn his name away. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that I had done research and the Historical Society there in Lafayette had retained the cemetery records showing where he's buried, there'd be no way that I could identify that grave site or who was buried there. You know, whenever I visit one of these places, it reminds me of the reality that we have a really short time here on earth, and we have a really short time that we're remembered. Again, I'll call upon my favorite singer-songwriter, Jimmy Buffett, who has a line in one of his songs. The song is called A Cowboy in the Jungle, and it goes like this: 24 hours and maybe 60 good years. It's really not that long a stay. Let that sink in, my friends. Also, in my mother's kitchen, there was a sign that hung there for as long as my memory allowed me to remember, which said, "Only one life. It will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last." When I was working as a hospital chaplain at IU Riley and at Howard Community in St. John's, I often heard when I was sitting with a spouse or a family member the tales of plans they had for retirement, but then their spouse had died, and they'd always look at me and say, "What do I do now?" And yet again, I want to remind you, I am not the only one who has these thoughts. It's even a popular topic in Hollywood. A few years back, there was a movie by that starred Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman called The Bucket List. The storyline is these two old men venture out after one of them finds he has a year to live, and they do all these wild things before he dies, which ends up not being a fatal disease. So I'm wondering, do you have a bucket list? I mean, I actually do. Maybe not all of it's written down, but it's in my mind at least. And some of the stuff I've already checked off. Like I wanted to go to the islands before I died, and now I've been there 4 times. Also, I wanted to travel to Europe. I've done that 4 times. But still unrealized is taking a month or multiple months on a road trip all over America. I have some more, but I won't bore you with those. Again, I'm not the only person that had a bucket list. It seems that Jesus had a bucket list too, or at least he had stuff he wanted to do or needed to do before his death. And Jesus' last year of life would have been a little while before the Jewish feast of Passover. The beginning of that story is recorded in the Gospel of John. So let's read the beginning of Jesus' last year of life as recorded by St. John in chapter 2, verses 1 through 25. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern of that is to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. And Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it out. And when the steward tasted the water that had become wine, he did not know where it came from. The steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first sign in the Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Now after this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother, his brother, and his disciples, and they remained there for a few days. The Passover of Jesus was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. Making a whip of cords, he drove all of them out of the temple, both the sheep and the cattle, and also poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He told them who were selling doves, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" And Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "The temple has been under construction for 46 years. How can you raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered what he had said, and they believed the scriptures and the word that Jesus had spoken. When he was in Jerusalem during the Passover festival, many believed in his name because they saw the signs that he was doing. But Jesus, on his part, would not entrust himself to them because he knew all people and needed no one to testify about anyone, for he himself knew what he was doing. It seems to me that Jesus was pretty serious about what he wanted to accomplish during his last year of his life. He turned water into wine to celebrate with his friends and drove a bunch of goose out of a temple who were doing everything except what was expected of people of God to do. I think I want to say he was anxious to change things, to improve life in his community through a myriad of means. Maybe stuff we can't do, but certainly an example of what can be done. How this bit of scripture of the last year of Jesus' life talks to me is that he had a certain sense of urgency. As well, you should too, especially if you knew you only have 1 year to live. And so I'd like us as a church to think about is how we would respond today if we found out we had a year left to live. Would we celebrate beyond belief? Would we search for justice in a world of injustice wholeheartedly? Would we reach out in new ways to those in need? Would we put our narcissism on the shelf and think of how we could leave a positive impact on the planet? I have mentioned to you before that while sometimes we think people ignore the church or even sometimes are hostile to it, time and time again, at the time of crisis, the time of death, the time of great celebration, the time of doubt, people turn to the church and those Christians who believe the faith. As the Gospel of John says, many believed in him because they too had seen the signs he had performed. Many can see the signs that you perform. Put yourself in the place of 1 year to live and to see if your attitude changes or if you're pressed to a new level. What would you do if you had 1 year to live? We'll continue this conversation next week with part 2 of what would you do if you had 1 year to live. Until then, this is the word of God for the people of God. Praise be to God.